Hello, everyone. My name is Vivian Owia, and I'm the host of the Feminist Sparc podcast, where we spark conversations around feminism and its practice in Africa. For this two-part series on ending gender-based violence, we are very, very excited and honored to be partnering with the amazing and revolutionary Swaiba podcast.
Yes, my name is Yambura Mondia. Thank you very much, Vivian. And I'm the host of Swaiba Podcast. A Swaiba Podcast, the Audible African Woman. We feature audible African women and feminists who are doing excellent things and advancing gender and feminism in their fields. And today we will be discussing, we're having a conversation around the 16 Days of Activism, where we speak about, the multi-stakeholder approach around GBV and what we can do to end it.
And it's important to remember that the 16 Days of Activism is an annual campaign against ending gender-based violence. And the theme for this year is Unite, Activism Against Ending Gender-based violence. And for this particular conversation, we are very honored to be in conversation with Njeri wa Migwi. We know Njeri wa Migwi as a very revolutionary activist. She's been part of different feminist spaces. She's been known as Mama Rescue, right? Mama Rescue. And so Njeri, just introduce yourself, tell us a little about the work that you do, and then we'll get right into the conversation.
My name is Njeri Migwi. I am the Executive Director of Usikimye, which is an organization that works towards ending the prevalence of gender-based violence. I am a feminist, an intersectional feminist, to be precise. I am a woman human rights defender. Women are my thing. And in everything that we do and in everything that we approach, we look at ending GBV through using survivor-informed, trauma-informed activism. We speak loud, we speak fast, and we are also on the ground doing the same and working towards seeing how we can give women an ease towards this GBV. And I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Njeri. It's so great to have you as part of the conversation today. And as we start the conversation, right, around 16 days of gender-based violence and just understanding what gender-based violence really is and how as women and girls we experience it and men as well, right? Can you paint a picture of how it looks like for you as Usikimye? How is your day-to-day work like? What do you do?
First of all, we have a call center. So most people call in either looking for rescue or looking for counseling or just looking for help. Or they don't know what to do. I've been raped. What do I do? So the calls either come to the call center or through my phone or through our inboxes. So there are numerous ways in which we get any of these calls. So my day-to-day will depend. First of all, I don't have a single day-to-day that looks exactly the same as the other, because I can have a day-to-day which is full of meetings, and then I can have a day-to-day in which, like for example, today, in which I woke up in a hospital because I had to take a survivor to the hospital, and we had to be with the survivor in the hospital. And also depending on, are we actually physically ourselves going to rescue? Like last week, we had to go get a child, and the child had to trust us enough to jump from a balcony because they were locked in. And all these things. So it's very different. I had to also, just the same week, I also had to just differently go to wake up very early at 5 so that I get there before anyone has left the house, and time. So and time so that we can be able to get the survivor. Sometimes survivors are locked in. Sometimes the survivor has been taken to different places. So yeah, we live dangerously over here. Yeah. Hospital, police station, courts. That's how my life looked like. Yeah.
I think when I hear you talk about, you had to rescue a child who had to jump out of off a balcony. The question that comes to me is, when we say 1 in every 3 women has experienced SGBV, most of us tend to think, oh, what does that even mean? Or most of us actually walk back, and then when you start unpacking SGBV, you realize perhaps all of us have experienced SGBV. So my question to you, Njeri, would be, what would you say ties together all those cases? Like it doesn't matter where it's coming, whether it's coming from Ukuru, whether it's Kilimani, whether it's political offices. What is the thing that ties all these things?
Power imbalances.
Yeah,
it's all about power and patriarchy. Really, if you look at it, because even the systems are also very patriarchal. Even when you're looking towards justice and even when you're looking towards helping somebody, you're looking at power, and women don't have the power to have any of these things. I remember I was in this very room and I was talking to somebody, and it was a young woman, and I was telling her about consent. And she couldn't understand how consent ties in to being raped. And I was telling her, the minute you say no, it ceases to be consensual and it becomes rape. And she was like, but if I was in this man's house,
I brought myself.
I brought myself.
Yeah.
So I cannot say I was raped. I say, when you withdrew your consent, that is it. But she's like, but this is a man, he can beat me up. And I said, that's exactly it. That is when you start to realize and you unpack, and suddenly what you thought is something normal, or you thought maybe I felt uncomfortable, suddenly you look at it as there was power imbalance somewhere, and I was afraid to say no, or I just withdrew it silently inside. But it was all about power. When you look at GBV, it's about one gender holding the power over the other and knowing that there is nothing you can do, irrespective of whether you're in Madare and you're surrounded by poverty, or irrespective of whether you are in affluent areas. When the very common thing that links them is they're all afraid.
Yeah.
Why are you afraid? Because there is power imbalance in these relationships. And as such, you're made vulnerable. And in your vulnerability, then you find yourself being a victim.
Right, Njeri. So let's talk more about this aspect of power, right? One of my favorite feminist bell hooks, she speaks about power as domination. She says that, there's an ecosystem of power, or there's an ecosystem of domination, basically where everyone in society has some sort of power over another person. And you've mentioned that men have power over women, right? Would you say in the cases where you've had to rescue children, would you say that women have power over those children? And what is perhaps their role as well in perpetrating gender-based violence?
What you've said is very true. Whereas men hold power over women, women hold power over children. And I feel because once you have been dispossessed of what you feel is your power, you tend to frustrate the next person. You tend to be the person that now feels like, where do I take my frustrations? Where do I take my anger? Where do I release this anger from? Where do I get my power back? And of course, you look at the next vulnerable person. And for most women, that would be children. And sometimes these are children who are often the vulnerable children who are in our care, because we don't do it to our children. We do sometimes, obviously, but these are mostly we do it to children who are vulnerable, who we find in our care, or even, let's say, in instances where it's school, children who have been put in cases of our power. And we do, because somehow when you're dispossessed of the one thing that you have, you want to show somebody else, I have it and I can do this. And so we tend sometimes to become perpetrators as well. And it's unfortunate that we do not see the correlation of our power being taken away now becomes something that now you want to get back.
But it's also how we conceptualize power. Yeah. But when you say that, I think my question would be, what are the things as Kenyans do we, because you know what, our conversations around power are very removed. But what are the conversations we're having around power, especially now with the current regime, but also moving into femicide and what the languages are? How do we use language to normalize power over that eventually sees us in spaces or in normalizing SGBV?
First of all, we look at SGBV. When people look at SGBV, they look at it under the lens of domestic violence. We don't look at it as femicide. We actually don't look at femicide as a result of GBV. And femicide is rising. I can tell you that for a fact. Just given this week, we've had like 3 cases we are aware of. Cases which have been spoken about, but casually. Nobody even uses the word femicide. We look at it as alichapwa na boyfriend yake. Her husband killed her or something. But we really don't look at it as there was what power dynamic led to him killing his wife, him killing the girlfriend, or things around that. We have a conversation that is so normal. Watu wawili wanajifunikia kwa blanketi moja. 2 people that cover themselves with the same duvet. That is the normalization of GBV.
Yes.
It's not our business. You
Yeah,
see? Every time, do you know people no longer get shocked when you tell them somebody got raped?
No,
It's become just
unfortunately.
something that is there in society. In fact, chances of you going to a police station and being asked to come with your rapist are very high. When it's only shocking to people when it becomes a young child. So that tells you how normal we have looked at this as. Only when you're telling them it was a 2-year-old, oh my God, somebody raped a 2-year-old. And you're like, wait. So that is the shocking part, because we've become so accustomed to it It's become something that is part of our life. Violence has become a language in this nation, unfortunately. Whether it's online bullying, whether it's just making somebody feel some type of way, we have normalized violence. So we don't look at it as something that is something that needs to get gotten rid of. We look at it as discipline. We look at it as that's how things are. That's how we've been running. And then we also go back and call it cultural. We go back and call it traditional. We go back and say these were the things that were happening, so we do not see a problem with them happening now. Or we also say, actually, somebody told me the other day, and I quote him, he said, it's because you're feminist. Feminism has reared its head, that's why there's violence. Because women are trying to become powerful, because women are trying to get their power. This was a conversation on Twitter. So feminism, being a feminist is now being associated with you want to get your power back.
But then also that proves the point in terms that violence is actually being used to censor or make sure that you don't take the power to be anything, right?
Yes. Why would you have power? If women have power, then it means... Do you ever see these conversations where we have and then people say, what about men?
Yeah.
It means that I'm trying to silence the conversation that we are having. It means that I'm trying to say you have no business talking about this. Because then you're trying to take your power back. And every time you try to take your power back, that's why you have to be radical about getting your power back. It's because there's always going to be forces that are going to silence you and try to show you these things were normal. If they happen to a mother, what is the problem with them happening to you?
Yeah.
And Njeri, you brought out an aspect of desensitization, right? You say that we've been desensitized so much to the point that we view violence as a normal thing. So in your work, as you go about rescuing survivors of violence, have you felt this desensitization within systems of justice? For example, when you go to the police, when you go to court for litigation processes, how is that like for you in your work?
Truly. Let me give you, I like working with examples because these are things I have seen, and lived in experiences for me are always going to be better than any data. You go to the police station and you're telling them this woman has been beaten. If, say, for example, the GBV desk is closed, and you'll hear the police saying, simwende mkatatulie nyumbani, go and solve this in the house. And I cannot tell you one or twice or thrice we've gone to a police station and we've been told to come with a rapist. And I have never understood that idea.
Oh, wow.
End of rudi na rape. Like, what? Or in an instance where I remember this girl, and she was a lawyer, but this particular time she was a victim. And we went to the police station and they told us, it was too early. Where were you going that early? And how do you expect us as a police to be able to recognize those rapists? And we just stood there and looking at them in shock, because we've come to report, because that's the first process. We've come to report. Do you see how it discourages you to even pursue anything else after that? Because you're like, wow, this is it. And I can tell you, we've handled over 1,000 cases of different forms of GBV, and only less than 10% have gotten to court. Because you're discouraged from the place of reporting. The first place of reporting, or you hear the apathy that people have, like, nothing is going to happen. When we report, nothing happens. Or when you go all the way to places where you're supposed to get justice, please remember these are people who are not even aware of how to take charge of the forensic evidence, or in instance where, like, for example, I had a woman who carried the clothes that she had with her, and the police never took them. 6 months down the lane, we are now giving testimony in court. The woman just removed the clothes from the place she was carrying them and said, these are the clothes I had when I was raped. And she was told they cannot be used because it's too late.
The time lapses.
And then it goes to the witnesses, and the witnesses are like, we're too afraid because you see this man that raped her, he's in the community where we are. He was given bail and he's back in the community and he's going to rape me too. So she never got justice. And yet she was locked away for 2 days. So even when you have jumped all these hurdles of going to the police, you go to the hospital tells you we only sign the P3 twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays. So if you're raped on Friday, you'll have to wait until Tuesday for your form to be signed. If you were beaten, it was a domestic violence case, you have to wait until a certain day when the hospital is available to sign your P3. Also, the delay in justice, the long court processes, it's tedious and it's exhausting, and people give up. So every time you see, like, we are making leeway, there are so many things that take us back to square zero. And the more people see this, the more people become desensitized, and they're like, no one cares, no one is bothered. We don't see justice. And you see justice sometimes in form of when somebody is arrested, it gives hope that,
Yeah.
this we are being heard.
Mhm.
But when justice is no longer being seen and is no longer valid, people say then justice is for the rich and for people who can afford it.
And Njeri, would you say that in your line of work as you rescue survivors, do you have other places that you turn to as well? Because I know you have a shelter, right?
Yes.
You have a shelter. Do you think there are enough shelters, say,
No.
for example, in Nairobi? So no, definitely
No.
not, right? So if that is the status of redress for survivors of violence, what can we do? What can we do to make sure that
What are
we
the
have
solutions?
we move at least towards ending gender-based violence? What solutions would you offer?
First of all, when it comes to shelters, we don't even have a Safe House Act where we can push for shelters. We're trying to do that, but shelters are literally operating out of their own volition. There is no legality or formality from the government that even allows us to have shelters. I have been arrested as a result of running safe houses. We have 3 actually, and they're not enough.
You have been arrested for?
Yes, for running a safe house, because the government didn't know what a safe house was. We were among the first people to set up a safe house. The government didn't know what a safe house was. So when a husband said his wife had disappeared, they came to the and they were able to track using means of power. You see where I was talking about power dynamic. This was a rich man, so he was able to track all the movement of his wife's phone, all the way to the Uber she took that took her to her house. So we came and we were arrested, and we were told we are illegally harboring women for purposes of trafficking. I mean, they even had a whole thing on how they could arrest us, and we were arrested, and we were and I stayed in a cell for 2 days in the police
Because
station
of running a safe house.
because of running a safe house. So even the people who are supposed to be helping with the redress, we are also at risk of our own lives. Even when I'm doing rescues, I'm also at risk of. I have had a gun on my head. I've had quite a few incidents that have happened to myself. But this is the thing. We need a court that actually addresses sexual and gender-based violence. We have one in Shanzu. They're already overwhelmed. I was there the other day.
Yeah.
We need one in Nairobi. We need one in all places that matter, where people can actually see and actually access justice. We need the government to provide these women who are going there with actual lawyers, not just telling us the prosecutor has your case, that can explain to them how the justice system works. Because I don't know, I'm walking into court, even as whether you're learned or not, the court is intimidating as it is. And it's terrifying that you're there. And we have an adversarial law system where you look at your rapist, you look at the person who beat you, you can imagine a small
Which
baby.
is re-traumatizing.
Yes, which is very traumatizing. So we need to look at ways in which we can speak and then we also need to look at therapy, counseling. We need to these survivors need to understand that trauma is something that once this incident happens to you, it's something that you're going to have to live with for the rest of your life. We need to have accessible counseling.
Mental health.
Mental health that survivors are able to access. All that is part of the healing process. And then we also need to look at how do we then reintegrate these people back into the community. Say, for example, it's my husband who attempted to kill me. And I can't go home because we also have issues in land whereby, yes, the law says that I can, as a woman, I am able to inherit land. But to be honest, am I? Can I? I can't inherit, because when I go back home, and we've had these cases where from the shelter, you're like, what do we do with this woman? We can't take her back to her husband. Her husband is going to kill her. And chances are, as I said, even when you reported, nothing was really done. So the case is just there hanging, right? So this man is still in the house. So you can't go back home there. So we try to take you back to your parents, where you find your brothers and the land. Maybe we had one case in Kinangope, the land had been divided between the brothers and the sister. But when we took her home, they beat her so badly. It was even a worse beating than what she got from her husband. So where is the legal redress for women who do not have a place where they can go back? Because that's a problem, which means it leaves us with having survivors in the safe house staying longer than they need to be because they don't have a place to go home. These laws are beautifully written, beautifully crafted. But if these laws and policies do not really address the injustices and the imbalances of power that actual people face, then they are not for the people. They're just beautiful paper.
Mhm. Thank you so much, Njeri. That sounds very intense, very difficult. As you know, it sounds like it's very difficult work, and I know that it is very difficult work. How do you take care of yourself as an activist, having been arrested, having had a gun to your head? You know, how do you take care of yourself mentally? How do you make sure that you're grounded in this work as you continue doing it?
Hey,
Difficult, right?
It's a very difficult question, especially because the work has to continue.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Wow, take a rest.
Do you feel that you have support as you do this work?
I do have support. I'm going to say I have support from different grounds. Let's say from friends, from activists like yourself, from people like Nyabura who calls me and tells me, Wabe.
That sounds like Nyambura.
Yes.
Quit your job.
Quit your job. Actually, that's what she says. Quit your job. It's changing you. Truthfully, I am a firm believer in therapy. I'm a firm believer in debriefing because let me tell you, you carry the weight between your shoulders, and people like us have realized carrying that weight between your shoulders is giving me a hump.
Yeah, literally.
I have a hump behind my shoulders that is growing from the stress of this work. So, yeah, debriefing, spending time with friends, just deciding today I'm very hard. I'm saying it like I actually do it, but I'm working towards towards doing it. Just taking days off. I'm also in a place where I'm realizing once I get to my house, that is it. No more calls and no more handling these cases. I have to also give myself time to rest, be with my family, be with my cats.
Your famous cats. Your very famous cats.
My very famous cats, yes.
Yeah.
So I can also, it's just even spending time with your pets just makes you feel like the world is not burning. Because most of the time I feel like the world is burning and no one is putting the fires out.
Yeah.
I feel like in this country we don't take GBV with the way that
As
it
seriously
needs.
as we should.
And even the people who now like us, who are the people who are the carers, we don't have the attention that we need, the wellness. So for me, it's for me to realize that this is it. This is the limit. I can't do beyond this. And now just start taking care of myself.
Thank you so much, Njeri, for providing insight into the very important work that you do as an activist. The theme for this year's 16 Days of Ending Gender-Based Violence, 16 Days of Activism against Ending Gender-Based Violence has been to make sure that, we unite as activists, that we do not work in silos, that we make sure that, all the stakeholders involved, all the parties involved can actually come together to make to end gender-based violence. And that is our call to action really today for this conversation, right, Nyambura?
Yes, as you hear, ending patriarchy or ending institutionalized sexism, as I like to say it, because as Njeri was explaining, you realize that from the family section, from the family setup to institutions of justice, the hurdles, and these hurdles are not, they're not out of the world. They're actually man-made. And so I think uniting, but also realizing that all of us hold fort to, I don't know how, hold a part of it.
Yeah.
And some of us, like Njeri, hold it in the dailiness of it, but also in the face of it. So uniting, collaborating, but also revising how GBV funding is looked at, right? But also giving resources to the people who actually deserve it. But may we never be too desensitized to think that SGBV or GBV is a normal occurrence nowadays, because I think that points to the decaying of our humanness as people. Njeri, we appreciate you. We are very sorry for the harm.
Thank you so much for
I keep saying this work you shouldn't have to do yet. It has to be done. And thank you for coming to our podcast.
Thank you for having me, Vivian and Nyambura. It was a pleasure to be here. And for me, I'm glad that these 16 days of activism do shed and have a spotlight on, GBV. But for me, every day is activism against violence, because violence doesn't just happen randomly. Violence is every day. And this conversation has to take a turn where we are looking at actual, reasonable things that we can do to actually stop GBV. Because right now, we have a monster and it keeps on growing. And all of us, I'm going to put this analogy. I feel like the little boy who has his finger on the dike trying to stop the spread. but it's overwhelming. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Njeri, for joining us in conversation and spotlighting the actual organizing work that goes into ending gender-based violence.
Santeni. Thank you. Share, support, collaborate.
Unite.
Thank you.